Mark Dawson sat silently on the covered patio behind his house, his eyes fixed on the back door as if willing it to open. Any minute now, Vanessa, his wife of almost 20 years, would walk through. He wasn't sure what he'd say when she did. He just knew he needed to see her face. To his right, seated at a slight angle in a weathered wooden chair, was Rachel Monroe, a friend and longtime colleague. She nursed a mug of coffee while quietly observing him. Mark took a long, slow drag of his cigarette, then crushed it out in the ashtray on the table. Without missing a beat, he reached for another, lighting it with the same mechanical motion. The smoke curled up lazily into the warm, late afternoon air. "You okay, Mark?" Rachel asked softly. He gave his head a small, almost imperceptible shake. "Not really, Rachel," he admitted, exhaling. "But I'm glad you're here." She gave him a faint smile. "That's what friends are for, Mark." He nodded silently, the corner of his mouth twitching not quite a smile. As the cigarette burned between his fingers, his mind drifted back more than 2 decades. He was just a kid when he enlisted, spent 4 intense years in the Marine Corps as a military policeman. He'd always dreamed of becoming a cop, more specifically, a detective. After his service, he used his veteran benefits to enroll full-time in college. Criminal justice major, laser-focused. He had a plan. And it was during a business law class of all places that he met Vanessa. She was wrapping up her business degree, stylish and sharp, and she noticed him immediately. Mark wasn't oblivious. At just over 6 feet tall and built like a linebacker, broad shoulders, narrow waist, and solid muscle from years of military conditioning, he wasn't exactly easy to miss. He carried himself with quiet confidence. Authority clung to him like a second skin, even out of uniform. They started talking, then dating, then fell for each other harder than either expected. She was 5 years younger and had already been engaged once, though she rarely spoke of it. Said the guy graduated high school a couple of years before her and moved to New York. Whatever happened, it didn't matter. Mark never cared about her past. Hell, he wasn't exactly a choir boy himself back in the Corps. He'd chased women wherever he could find them, more than once waking up with a stranger's name on his lips. But Vanessa? She was different. He knew it almost immediately. She was the one, the woman he could actually see himself building a life with. They got married just after graduation. He was hired by the city police department, though it took 6 long months before a spot opened up in the academy. In the meantime, he worked as a 911 dispatcher, far from glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept him close to the job he wanted. Vanessa landed a solid position at a major investment firm with offices nationwide. Between the two of them, they pulled in enough to rent a small but cozy apartment on the west side of town. It was more than enough. Most of their time was spent in the bedroom anyway, lost in each other like teenagers who never quite grew out of their honeymoon phase. Vanessa seemed to love her work, though one part always rubbed Mark the wrong way: those damn quarterly meetings. Every 3 months, she had to fly out east to Washington, D.C., or New York for seminars, conferences, meetings with government officials. She said it was all standard corporate stuff, nothing exciting. 3 days, maybe a week at most. But Mark hated every second she was away. Still, he tried not to let it show. He trusted her, loved her, until the day she came home with news that knocked the wind out of him. She was pregnant. Their first child, Liam, was born about 6 months after Mark graduated from the academy, roughly a year and a half after their wedding. He remembered feeling stunned, elated, terrified. He'd thought she was still on the pill, but she said accidents happen, and in the end, he didn't care. Holding that baby boy in his arms for the first time, nothing else mattered. 2 years later, Emily arrived, tiny, fierce, and blonde like her mother. Vanessa had a rough delivery the second time, though, and she begged Mark to get a vasectomy. He didn't question it. She said it was for her health, that it was too dangerous to go through that again. And because he loved her, because he trusted her, he did it. No second thoughts. Just commitment. Vanessa had struggled during Emily's delivery. The labor had been long, messy, and frightening, far more complicated than Liam's. Mark had never seen her in that much pain, and once it was all over, She held his hand with pale knuckles and pleaded with him to get a vasectomy. "Please," she whispered through exhausted breaths. "I can't go through that again." He didn't hesitate. He scheduled the appointment and got it done without argument. He figured they had two beautiful kids, a boy and a girl. What more could anyone want? Both children had inherited Vanessa's signature look, thick blonde hair and ice blue eyes that felt like they could see straight through you. Striking, no doubt about it. Strangers always commented on how much they looked like their mother. Rarely him. Mark's own mother had once quietly suggested, over a cup of tea, that he should maybe, just maybe, consider a DNA test. "Not that I'm accusing anyone," she had said gently, eyes dropping to her lap. "But they don't resemble you, sweetheart. Not even a little." He had shut that down fast. "Vanessa would never cheat on me," he told her firmly, maybe too firmly. "Don't bring this up again." "If you say so," his mother replied, soft and solemn, but the way she said it made something shift uneasily in his chest. About 5.5 years into his time on the force, Mark decided to take the detective's exam. It was no small feat, but he threw himself into it, just like everything else. Studied nonstop, drilled the oral boards, and leaned hard on the discipline he'd built in the Marines. He passed, with flying colors. The promotion stunned almost everyone, including Mark himself. Detectives usually didn't make it that fast, but he had something to prove, not just to the department, but to himself. He was chasing more than just a badge. He was chasing respect, identity, stability. The timing was perfect. He and Vanessa were itching to get out of their cramped apartment. With his raise and her recent promotions at work, they found a clean, modest, 2-story, 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with decent schools. The kind of place you picture when you say the word family. A few months later, Vanessa invited him to her company's Christmas gala. It was being held at the ballroom of the local Marriott catered, glitzy, filled with financial sharks in $1,000 suits. Mark hated those types of events, but she asked, and he went. That night, she introduced him to someone named Eric Bergstrom, a middle manager who'd flown in from the New York office. "Oh yes, this guy's one of the best we've got," Eric said while shaking Mark's hand with a confident grip. "I heard you just made detective. That's impressive. I'll definitely sleep better tonight knowing you're on the case." Mark offered a tight smile. "Thanks, just doing my part." There was something about Eric that set Mark on edge. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was the man's long, golden blonde hair, too perfect. Or those glacier blue eyes that were almost unnaturally piercing. He looked like a damn movie villain. Tall, lean, arrogant as hell. And something about the way he spoke, like he was sizing Mark up, piece by piece. "You look like the strong, silent type," Eric added, tilting his head slightly, a glimmer of smug amusement in his tone. Mark frowned, thrown by the comment. "Sorry?" Eric grinned, eyes flashing. "I was once engaged to Vanessa, you know, back before I graduated high school and moved to New York." Mark's stomach twisted slightly, but he kept his face unreadable. "I see. Anyway, it's good to finally meet you," Eric said smoothly. "I've heard so much about you. Is it true you were awarded a Silver Star?" Mark nodded once. "Yeah, it's true." "A real war hero," Eric chuckled, raising his drink. "Well, thank you for your service." "Most of the real heroes don't come home," Mark replied flatly, refusing to let the man get under his skin. Later, he watched Vanessa dance with Eric, twice nothing too intimate, but there was whispering, smiling, shared looks. When she returned to their table, Mark made a point of taking her hand and guiding her back to her seat himself. "It was nice seeing you again, Vanessa," Eric said with a wink. "And a pleasure meeting you, Detective." "Likewise," Mark said, watching the subtle smirk that tugged at the man's lips as he walked away. In the car ride home, Mark kept one hand on the steering wheel and one eye on Vanessa. "So, that was the guy you were engaged to before we met?" "Yes," she said quietly, barely above a whisper. "Don't you think it would have been a good idea to mention you're still working with your old fiancé?" He's in New York. We don't see each other much. He's in a completely different division from me. She sighed. I'm sorry. I didn't think it was important anymore. It was so long ago. But you're right. I probably should have told you about this, Vanessa said, her voice low and genuinely apologetic. Forgive me? Mark let out a soft chuckle, the tension slowly bleeding out of his shoulders. Of course, he said, half laughing. So, what happened between you two, if you don't mind me asking? Not at all, she replied, keeping her gaze steady on his. I wanted to get married. I wanted a family. He wanted the benefits of marriage, just not the responsibility that came with it. You know, kids, a mortgage, bills, actual commitment. Mark nodded, already forming a picture in his head. Of course, Eric wouldn't want the hard stuff. Guys like that always chase the highs and dodge the weight. When he moved to New York, he told me straight up that he'd probably start dating other women. That's when I knew it wasn't going to work. I ended the engagement. Simple as that. I see, Mark said quietly. He looked at her for a long second. Any regrets? Vanessa smiled and shook her head. None at all. I have everything a girl could ever dream of. She reached across the center console and took his right hand in both of hers, lifting it gently to her lips. Her kiss lingered on his knuckles. And right now, she whispered, her voice dipping into that sultry tone she used when she wanted something. I'd love it if you'd take me upstairs and make some very passionate, very reckless love to me. Mark's lips curled into a grin. Your wish is my command, my love. That night was intensifiery, familiar, and full of something deeper. Maybe reassurance, maybe guilt. He didn't know then. And afterward, he put Eric out of his mind. Vanessa never mentioned him again, and he never brought it up. The quarterly trips kept happening. She always came back with stories about boardroom meetings and flight delays. Mark never suspected a thing. Vanessa remained as loving and attentive as ever. Their life together seemed stable, maybe even enviable. Over time, Mark got to know a few of Vanessa's co-workers, mostly friendly faces at company functions, or the rare lunch break when he'd swing by her office unannounced. He didn't think much of it, but looking back, he remembered the way some of them glanced at him, especially the newer ones. Wide eyes, hesitant smiles, like they were holding something back. He got particularly close to one of her colleagues, Megan Carter. She and her husband had been key witnesses during a downtown bank robbery 2.5 years earlier. Mark had personally arrested the suspect after a dramatic takedown, and Megan and her husband testified in court. It was traumatic. She'd stared down the barrel of a loaded shotgun. Mark admired the strength it took to stand up there and point to the man who nearly ended her life. You recognize the assailant? The prosecutor had asked. Megan didn't flinch. That's him, right there, she said, her voice unwavering as she pointed directly at the defendant. She'd earned Mark's respect that day. Since then, whenever he stopped by Vanessa's office, he made a point to check in on Megan. He felt responsible somehow, like protecting her didn't stop at the courtroom steps. But lately, Megan had been acting off. Every time she saw him, she'd look at him with this strange mix of sympathy and guilt. He'd noticed that same look on other co-workers' faces, too quiet, uncomfortable, like they knew something he didn't. And one day, Mark decided enough was enough. He'd get to the bottom of it. He walked into the office unannounced, as he'd done many times before. Vanessa and Megan were usually in the back. As he headed toward Vanessa's desk, Megan practically jumped up from her chair to intercept him. She's not here, she blurted quickly. Vanessa just stepped out. Where'd she go? Mark asked, already feeling that little itch of suspicion behind his ribs. She had to drop off some documents at the legal department. She might be gone a while. Megan's voice was too casual, her smile too rehearsed. Mark narrowed his eyes. You okay, Megan? He asked. Everything all right with you and your husband? Oh yeah, we're fine, she replied. But then after a beat, she added, I'm just curious. Did you know Vanessa's been seeing Eric during her trips out east? The words hit Mark like a sucker punch. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. No, he said flatly. That's not true. Why would you say something like that? Megan looked away, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. Because she told me you two have an open marriage, that you were okay with it, because of your injury. Mark stared at her, confused and suddenly ice cold. What injury? She said you were hurt on duty, that you couldn't really have sex anymore. Mark took a step back like he'd been physically shoved. The air felt too thick to breathe. I'm sorry, Megan said quickly, her eyes wide with panic. I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she exaggerated. The way she talked about it, I thought you knew. Mark's mind was spinning. Open marriage? Injury? What the hell was she telling people? I stuck my nose where it didn't belong, Megan added, her voice shrinking as she took in the stunned look on Mark's face. I'm sorry. Really, I figured you knew. Mark let out a slow, controlled breath, trying to keep the tremor out of it. Well, you're right about one thing, I'm not injured. Not even close. And I sure as hell don't understand why she'd say something like that. He paused for a second, then looked her straight in the eyes. Megan, do you have any proof? Anything concrete? She hesitated for a moment, chewing the inside of her cheek. Then she nodded. Yeah, I took a few photos on my phone the last time we were in New York. I didn't really plan to. Something about the way they were acting. It didn't sit right with me. Mark's pulse quickened. If you still have them, could you send them to me? Sure, she said. He grabbed a pen and wrote his email on the back of a business card, handing it to her. How long has this been going on? He asked, his voice low and steady, though his heart was thudding like a war drum. I don't know exactly, Megan admitted, but I've seen them together every single trip since I started. That's 5 years now. 5 years? He repeated quietly, the words hitting like a hammer to the chest. Give or take. Mark nodded slowly. Do me a favor, all right. Don't say a word about this to Vanessa. Not a thing. Mother's word, Megan said, and I'll send the photos now. Thanks, Mark said, already backing toward the door. And by the way, I've never been injured on duty, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with me in bed. With that, he turned and walked out of the office. His mind was racing, his chest tight with confusion, disbelief, and something dangerously close to rage. Had Vanessa really been cheating on him all this time? With Eric, of all people? But nothing made sense. There had been no signs, no behavioral changes, no emotional distance, no cold shoulders or sudden bursts of guilt. She'd always been warm, affectionate, present. He hadn't checked her bags, sure. He hadn't grilled her on her itineraries or timed her phone calls. But she always called when she was away, always came home the same smile, the same kiss, the same everything. Could Megan be exaggerating, mistaken? He wasn't about to jump to conclusions. He'd seen lives ruined by bad hunches. He needed evidence. The photos arrived 10 minutes after he left Vanessa's office. Mark sat in his car, parked across the street from their house, and opened the email. The first photo knocked the air out of his lungs. Vanessa, with Eric, dancing close, too close, and kissing, full-on kissing. The second photo showed Eric's hand on her barely covered backside, his fingers spread possessively beneath a skirt Mark didn't even recognize as shorter, tighter, sexier than anything she'd ever worn around him. Mark's stomach turned. But it was the third photo that broke him. Vanessa and Eric walking into an elevator, her hand in his, her face turned up toward him, wearing a look Mark knew by heart, a soft, sultry smile, the one she used to give him right before they made love. His chest ached like something vital had just cracked inside him. He blinked hard and set the phone down, his hands trembling slightly. Back at the station, he tried to distract himself, stared at the situation board, made a few notes, but it was no use. Every time he blinked, he saw those photos. That look, her face. Finally, he gave up. "Hey, Lieutenant," one of the other detectives called out as he passed. "You good?" Mark forced a half smile. Heartburn. Think I ate something weird. I'm heading home for the day. All right. Feel better, sir. He nodded, walked out, and headed straight for home. Once inside, he cracked open a beer and sat down at his desk. He opened his calendar, scrolling forward to see when Vanessa's next trip to the East Coast was scheduled. Friday, just a couple of days away. The colored strip on her synced calendar showed she'd be gone for a full week. He copied the photos to his computer and began enhancing them, sharpening the images, zooming in on details. When he blew up Eric's face, that familiar unease returned with brutal clarity. That face, those eyes. Something clicked in his brain like a gun being cocked. Mark reached into a drawer and pulled out a couple of framed photographs, Liam's high school portrait, Emily's birthday photo. He placed them side by side and stared hard. His breath caught. Liam was a mirror image of Eric's same. Strong jawline, same intense blue eyes, same long, straight nose. Emily too less, obviously, but the resemblance was there. God damn, Mark whispered, a chill running through his spine. Liam is. He's him. He's Eric's kid. And Emily. Emily came in second, genetically speaking, but even she carried echoes of Eric's features, especially around the eyes and cheekbones. Mark stared at the photographs until they blurred through his tears. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and leaned back in his chair, breathing heavily. He had to know for sure. Grabbing his phone, he called a DNA testing service he'd used once for a case fast, discreet, and reputable. After verifying his identity, he asked them to prep a paternity test kit for 3 individuals, himself and the kids. He told them he'd pick it up first thing in the morning. Just as he was about to head out the door, his phone buzzed. A familiar tone. Vanessa. He stared at her name flashing across the screen, then answered. Hey, he said, forcing calm into his voice. Mark, are you okay? She asked, concerned. You sound a little off. I'm fine, he replied quickly. Just working a tough case. It's frustrating, and I think something I ate is messing with my stomach. Oh no, she said. I hope you feel better soon. Listen, I wanted to let you know I've got that week-long trip coming up, remember? East Coast stuff. I'll be working late tonight, going over the itinerary with the team. Then we're grabbing dinner and maybe a few drinks, so I probably won't get home until after 11. No problem, Mark said, his voice smooth and steady. He'd heard this routine so many times, it was practically white noise now. Could you watch the kids tonight? She asked. Make sure they get to bed by 9:30. They've got tests tomorrow, and I really want them well rested. Of course. You're the best, she said, her tone sweet and casual. All right. See you later. Love you. Yeah, he said. Love you too. He ended the call and stared at the phone in his hand. The words tasted like ash, pretending everything was normal. Pretending he wasn't questioning the very foundation of their life. It was the hardest part of all. If he was right, it meant Vanessa had been lying to him for their entire marriage, that she had built this life on betrayal and deception, and that he had never seen it. The only way to survive this was to compartmentalize, lock the pain behind a mental door, and treat this like any other investigation. Follow the clues, stick to the facts, let logic lead, not rage. He picked up the DNA test kit that evening and got home before the kids returned from school. He couldn't just ask them outright not without explaining things they weren't ready to hear. They weren't stupid. They'd pick up on something if he made it obvious. So he waited. Saturday through dinner, helped with homework, kept his voice even, his demeanor light. Once they were fast asleep, he moved quietly through the hallway and gathered what he needed. A few cheek swabs, a steady hand. No questions, no explanations, just what was necessary. He hated every second of it, but it had to be done. After sealing the samples and labeling them, Mark sat down at his desk again. He stared at his phone for a long moment, then scrolled through his contact list. There he was, Samuel Costa, a retired detective who had relocated to New York and started his own private investigation firm. Speciality? Infidelity cases. They'd worked together back in the day. Good cop, smart, discreet. And Mark trusted him. He hit dial, hoping Sam would pick up. Costa and Associates, came the gravelly voice on the other end. Sam, you old dog, Mark said. There was a pause. Mark Dawson? No way. Yeah, it's me. How the hell are you? Wait, don't tell me. You finally realized you'll never make captain and you want to come play in the private sector? Sam joked. Mark forced a short laugh. Not quite, but I do have a job for you if you're interested. And yes, I'll pay. Sam's tone shifted. Talk to me. I think Vanessa's cheating on me, Mark said. And if I'm right, this didn't just start last year. This has been going on a long time. Sam let out a low whistle. Shit. You serious? Dead serious. When? She's flying to New York this Friday. Gone for a full week. I assume you've got the guy's name? I do, Mark said. I'll email you her full itinerary and a photo of the guy I believe she's seeing. His name's Eric Bergstrom. Got it, Sam replied. You want full coverage? Surveillance, photos, video reports? All of it, Mark said. I need the truth. Every inch of it. I understand you want the full range of services, Sam said over the phone. Audio, video, photos, full written report? All of it, Mark confirmed. No shortcuts, no soft landings. I need the truth, every single inch of it. Don't hold back. I want to know everything. Sam's voice softened just a bit. How much you think this'll run you, huh? Mark was ready for the number, whatever it was. You tell me. Come on, man, Sam said with a snort. You've saved my ass more than once. Just cover my expenses. Buy me a beer when this is over, and we'll call it even. Mark exhaled, half laughing. I don't want to take advantage of you. Damn it, Dawson, Sam barked in his thick New York accent, making Mark smile for the first time that day. You ever consider that I owe you? Let me do this. You're a real friend, Sam, Mark said quietly. Now you're getting it, Sam chuckled. Let me give you my secure email. You ready? Mark grabbed a pen and scribbled it down, then read it back to confirm. Got it. Perfect. As soon as you have the itinerary and that photo, send it over. I will, Mark said. We'll talk soon. Hang in there, buddy. As he ended the call, Mark heard the sound of the front door creaking open. Liam and Emily were back from school. He stepped into the living room, trying to shake off the storm inside him and wear his best dad face. Pizza okay for tonight? He asked, heading toward the kitchen. Obviously, Liam said with a grin. Yeah, please, Emily chimed in, dropping her backpack on the couch. Is Mom at another meeting? Mark nodded, keeping his tone light. Yeah, she's got another trip coming up Friday. She'll be gone for a week. A whole week? Emily asked, the sarcasm in her tone slicing sharper than she likely intended. Yep, a full week, Mark said, forcing a smile. So while she's away, you two need to be on your best behavior. And don't forget I'm armed and I have handcuffs. That made both kids laugh. And for a fleeting second, Mark felt like things were still normal. They ate pizza in the living room, watching cartoons and cracking jokes. After dinner, Mark looked at them seriously. You two ready for those tests tomorrow? Pretty much, Emily said confidently. Yeah, I think I'm good, Liam added. Good, Mark said. Still, I want you both to hit the books for a bit before turning in. Mom lets us stay up until 10 on test nights, Liam protested. Don't push your luck, Mark replied with mock sternness. Lights out at exactly 9. Shouldn't it be 9 p.m. and not just 9? Emily teased, raising an eyebrow. Mark smirked. You're absolutely right, my genius daughter. Now get upstairs. They gathered their books and headed toward their rooms. Mark watched them disappear up the stairs, his heart tightening again. They were good kids. He loved them more than life itself. And now, he wasn't even sure they were biologically his. That thought hurt more than anything. He returned to his home office and pulled out a blank white notebook. If he was going to treat this like an investigation, as he knew he had to be needed to approach it methodically. He titled the first page, Paternity. Then he began writing, starting with Megan's account. He printed the photos she had sent and taped them in. Underneath, he attached comparison shots of Liam and Emily beside Eric's enlarged photo. Then came the timeline. He opened Vanessa's travel history and cross-referenced it with the children's birth dates. Like clockwork, her quarterly meetings aligned almost perfectly with the window of conception. Was it just coincidence? He stared at the calendar for a long time. Number he already knew the answer. Mark's mind drifted back to the night they drove home from the Christmas party, when he had asked her if she had any regrets, and she had smiled and said, "I have everything a girl could dream of." At the time, it felt sweet. Now, it felt like a punch to the gut. Suresh had it all. A stable home, a husband who adored her, a couple of kids, a good career, and a lover on the side. A man with a lot of equipment, no doubt. And a clueless husband back home playing father to someone else's children. "Damn her," Mark whispered, gripping his pen so hard it nearly snapped. "Damn her to hell." He glanced at the clock. It was 9:45 p.m. He closed the notebook slowly and slid it into the bottom drawer of his desk, locking it with a quiet click. The weight in his chest felt heavier than ever, but his steps were deliberate as he grabbed the DNA test kit from the shelf. He looked toward the hallway and noticed the soft amber glow under the children's doors had vanished. Lights off. They were asleep. Mark crept silently through the darkened hallway, stopping by each door. He cracked them open just enough to peek inside. Liam was curled up under his comforter, one arm slung over a pillow. Emily lay sprawled diagonally across her bed, hair fanned out like a golden halo. His heart twisted at the sight. My kids, he thought, no matter what happens. With practiced ease, he moved quickly, 2 swabs, one from each. They didn't even stir. He made sure they were tucked in again, then leaned over and kissed their foreheads, whispering, "I love you," like a prayer he wasn't sure would ever be answered the same again. Back in his office, he added his own DNA to the test kit, filled out the forms with clinical precision, then sealed everything and placed it into his briefcase. His hands lingered on the zipper longer than necessary. It felt final, like sealing away a piece of his life. He dropped into his chair and stared at the ceiling. If the test comes back the way I think it will, then what? Divorce? Almost certainly. But that was just the beginning. Child, custody, support, property, visitation, and what if she fights dirty? He scribbled a note to consult a family law attorney. Then there was the legal side. Could Vanessa be charged with fraud? Perjury? If she knew Eric was the real father and still signed his name on the birth certificates, that had to be a crime? And what about Eric? Could he be held responsible for back child support? The questions kept spiraling. What the hell have you done, Vanessa? He finally dragged himself to bed sometime after midnight, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay awake, staring into the dark, his mind racing until headlights cut across the bedroom ceiling. The garage door hummed. The back door clicked. It was 11:45 p.m. when Vanessa walked in. He was still lying there when she stepped into the bedroom, heels clicking on the hardwood, her coat folded over her arm. "You're still awake," she said, surprised. "You okay?" "Not really." She hesitated. "Do you want to talk about it?" "It's the case I'm working on," he said, voice flat. "Guy comes home, finds out his entire marriage was built on a lie. The kids he raised for over 10 years, not his." She froze in place. "Oh my God, what happened?" He snapped. Mark said, voice sharp. "Killed her with his bare hands, then the kids, then himself." "Jesus Christ," she whispered, one hand covering her mouth. He turned his head slightly and watched her reaction. "Yeah," he added softly. "I can't even imagine how he must have felt." She stood silent for a beat, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Makes me feel lucky that we don't have those kinds of problems." You know I love you, right? She asked after a moment. Yes, he replied. You don't sound convinced. I believe you. Good, she said quietly. It's better that way. She paused again, then added, By the way, I'm leaving a day early Thursday instead of Friday. What? Mark asked, sitting up slightly. Why? There's something I need to settle before the official meetings start. I'll pack in the morning before work. I left the itinerary for you on the kitchen table. Sorry for the short notice. What about your reservation? Confirmed this morning. So you knew since this morning and didn't say anything? I didn't think it'd be a problem, she said. Is it? He stared at her. I just wanted one more day with you, before you go. She softened her voice. I'm sorry. Really. It's just, I need to take care of this. I get it, he said. Long day. Go take a shower. Get some rest. Thanks for being understanding, she said, kissing his cheek before heading toward the bathroom. The door clicked shut behind her. As soon as he heard the water running, Mark slipped out of bed and went straight to her purse. He had never done this before, never even considered it. But tonight, all bets were off. He grabbed her phone and tried to unlock it. The passcode had changed. His heart dropped. When did she change this? He put it back where it was and checked the rest of the purse. Receipts, lipstick, gum. And then he saw it. A box labeled Plan B One Step, Emergency Contraceptive. He stared at it like it might explode in his hand. She said the pills helped regulate her cycle, he thought. But why would she need this? His stomach turned as he snapped a photo of the box with his phone, then quietly returned everything exactly how he found it. Jailed for up to 5 years per offense, Lucy said, her voice calm but razor sharp. Mark blinked. Wait, seriously? She nodded, folding her hands on the desk. Dead serious. Every state's different, but here, if she knowingly listed you as the father on a legal document while being fully aware that you weren't, that's paternity fraud. And because it's a sworn declaration under penalty of perjury, the perjury charge is also on the table. Mark leaned back, jaw tightening. He felt like he was standing on a cliff's edge, the ground shifting beneath him. That's a lot to take in. I know, Lucy said gently. Which is why I'm telling you let's wait for the evidence. DNA, surveillance, whatever your investigator uncovers. We don't move until we have something solid. But once we do, Mark nodded slowly. We move hard. That's the plan, she confirmed. He looked around her office for a second sleek, minimalist, framed degrees on the wall. No nonsense, just like the woman herself. He was glad he'd come to her. Thank you, Lucy, he said quietly, for taking this seriously. Of course, she replied. I deal with cases like this more often than you'd think. The difference is, most men don't come in until it's already destroyed them. You're here early. That gives us options. Mark stood and shook her hand. I'll send you whatever I get. She gave a small nod. And in the meantime, keep your head down. Act normal. Don't let Vanessa suspect a thing. The more rope she has, the tighter the knot she ties around herself. That morning had started like any other, and now he was preparing to bring down his own marriage like a criminal case. Earlier that same day, after Vanessa had gone to work, Mark had paid a visit to Dr. Linda Piercia, department psychologist, and one of the only people he could trust with what was going on inside his head. She was younger than him by a few years. Married, 3 kids, sharp as hell. Brown hair pulled back in a tidy twist. Brown eyes that read people like open books. She welcomed him into her office with a curious tilt of the head. Well, this is a surprise, she said, motioning him in. Come in, sit down. This must be serious. What's going on, Lieutenant? Mark closed the door behind him, lowered himself into the chair, and then unloaded. He told her everything what Megan had said. The photos, the meeting with Sam, the suspicions, the Plan B box, the DNA test he'd just mailed off. All of it. He didn't hold back. Linda listened carefully, only interjecting with the occasional nod or clarifying question. When he finally paused, she leaned forward. "But you don't have confirmation yet," she said. "Not yet," he admitted. "But if the test comes back the way I think it will, it changes everything. I don't think I'll be able to forgive her, or even look at her the same. It'll be over." She nodded. "Have you spoken to the kids yet?" "No," he said, the word falling like a stone. "Not yet. I don't know how to. Hell, they don't even know what's coming. They've always seen us as solid, stable. I don't want to blow that up unless I have to." "They'll be devastated," Linda said gently, "especially if they find out the truth in a way you can't control. You're the only father they've ever known, Mark. Don't underestimate how much that means to them." "I know," he whispered. "I've always told them to be honest, even when it hurts. So how can I lie now? They'll find out eventually. I'd rather it come from me." She gave him a long, empathetic look. "How are you holding up with all this?" He let out a dry laugh. "Poorly. If what I suspect is true, then the last 20 years of my life have been built on a lie." "You haven't talked to Vanessa yet?" "Number. Not until I have proof. Cold, hard facts. Otherwise, it's just a fight. I don't want to fight. I want to be able to bury her in truth, not suspicion." "That's fair," she said. "Look, when you get the results, come back. We'll talk again. And remember, no matter what, the kids come first. You may or may not be their biological father, but emotionally, you are their father. That matters more than DNA." He swallowed hard and nodded. I needed to hear that. She stood with him and offered a hand. "And Mark, my door's always open. You're not alone." He squeezed her hand, grateful. "Thanks, Linda. I'll be in touch." Then he left and headed straight to Lucy's office's next stop on the path toward the truth, knowing full well that whatever came next, there would be no going back. "Sentenced to 5 years in prison for each offense," Lucy continued, her tone clinical but firm. "And if Eric knew if she told him, and he allowed it to happen, that could easily be considered conspiracy. And in this state, conspiracy's a felony." "Damn," Mark muttered, jaw tight. "Yeah," Lucy said, leaning back in her chair. "This could get messy, very messy. But let's not jump the gun." She opened a folder and jotted a few notes. "I'll open a case file but won't prepare anything formal until we've got hard evidence. Meanwhile, I'll get my own investigators' working backgrounds, connections, past communication. We'll see what we dig up." Mark nodded. "In the meantime," she said, eyes narrowing slightly, "don't tip her off. Let her feel safe, normal. Give her enough rope, and she'll tie the noose herself. Don't do anything rash. And remember, your kids come first." "I understand," Mark said, voice steady. They shook hands, and Mark left. As soon as he stepped into his house, his phone buzzed in his pocket. "Sam." "Hey, buddy," Sam said, his voice casual but focused. "How you holding up?" "I'm all right," Mark replied. "Vanessa's probably already touched down in New York." "I figured," Sam said. "Just so you know, I managed to get the camera in place. Room's rigged. Audio, motion sensor, everything. It's got its own server for remote viewing and recording. Want the IP?" "Yes," Mark said immediately, grabbing a pen. Sam rattled off the address and login credentials. Mark jotted everything down in a small notepad. "Thanks, Sam. Seriously." "Anytime," he said. "I'm headed to the airport now. Her flight lands in an hour. I'll keep eyes on her." They hung up, and Mark walked straight to his office, powered on his computer, and logged into the server. Meanwhile, 30,000 feet above him, Vanessa Dawson sat in the window seat of a flight bound for New York, sipping on club soda and staring out at the clouds below. Almost 20 years of marriage. She couldn't believe how fast it had gone. Mark had been the perfect husband, dedicated, strong, reliable, a decorated Marine, a respected police officer, a man who put his family first, always. He taught Liam how to throw a baseball and cast a fishing line. He taught Emily how to aim a .22 at the range. He adored them. And he adored her. That part made her feel worse than anything. A sliver of guilt slipped into her thoughts, just like it always did at 30,000 feet. But she pushed it down. She had learned how to live with it, rationalize it, manage it. The truth wash couldn't help herself. Eric had been her first true love, her first everything, the man who'd awakened her heart and body. He had a body built for sin and a magnetism that never faded. And when he said he didn't want children, it devastated her. But she stayed until he left, moved to New York, told her flat out he'd be seeing other women. So she left too. She met Mark not long after. Strong, disciplined, good-looking in a way that reminded her of Eric but safer. Kinder. He was someone she could build a life with, raise children with. But she still wanted Eric's children. And when the opportunity came, she took it. Their affair reignited during her very first quarterly trip to New York, and from that moment on, it never really stopped. Every few months, just like clockwork, she saw him again. She booked separate rooms, wore new lingerie, deleted every message after reading it. She called Mark every night while she was away. Always sounded tired, professional, normal. And she was careful, always careful. She took her birth control pills like clockwork, except during the week she traveled. Then she stopped. Mark never asked, never questioned. He trusted her completely. That trust was her greatest shield. She had gotten pregnant with Liam during one of those trips. She knew it instantly. The timing was too perfect. Mark was still in the police academy. He barely had time to sleep, let alone make a baby. She told him anyway. Told him it was his. Played shocked when he looked confused. Blamed the pill. Smiled when he said he didn't care. When Liam was born, she saw Eric in him immediately. But Mark didn't. He saw a baby, a son, and he loved him completely. Eric never objected either. He knew, of course he knew, but he was fine staying in the background. Emily came next, same scenario, different trip. After that, she'd convinced Mark to get a vasectomy, told him it was too dangerous for her to go through another pregnancy. He agreed without a fight. No more babies, no more risk of confusion. Just Eric's children, raised by Mark. A win-win. For her. And now, as she looked out the window at the skyline peeking over the clouds, she wondered, how much longer can I keep this going? Andrew was about to graduate. Emily would be 17 soon. Maybe another year, 2 at most. Then she'd divorce Mark, collect her half of his pension, and move to New York for good. Maybe Eric would even want to meet the kids by then. Maybe it would finally all come together. Vanessa had perfected the routine. Whenever she was out of town, she called Mark every evening like clockwork, checking in, sounding tired from meetings, always keeping the tone casual and predictable. She never missed a call, never let a single red flag wave. And when she returned home, she made sure she was spotless laundered, fresh, calm. No lipstick on the wrong collar, no perfume lingering too long. She only wanted Eric's children. That was the plan. She and Mark had discussed family planning early in their marriage. They'd agreed she'd take birth control pills until they were ready. And she did, at least technically. She took the pills consistently, except during the weeks she traveled. She never told Mark she stopped before those trips. There were times when Mark would reach for her. Desire in his eyes, love in his touch, and she'd gently push him away. "I'm on my period," she'd whisper. Or, "I'm not feeling well tonight." The truth was, she didn't want to risk getting pregnant by him. She wanted Eric's DNA, not Mark's, passed down to her children. Vanessa became pregnant with Liam just 3 months after Mark started at the police academy. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, it was Eric's baby. But she told Mark it was his, played surprised. Claimed it must have been a fluketh pill, wasn't always 100% effective, right? Mark was confused. She could see it on his face, but he also looked happy. The idea of being a father overwhelmed him in the best possible way. That joy blinded him to every inconsistency. When Liam was born, she took one look and knew this was Eric's son. The resemblance was uncanny, but Mark was too taken by the miracle of fatherhood to notice. He held the baby like he'd won the lottery. Only his mother, sharp, skeptical, seemed to hesitate. "You sure that boy's yours?" she'd once asked, gently, but pointedly. Mark shut her down immediately. "Vanessa would never cheat on me," he told her, stubborn and absolute. And that was that. Of course, Eric knew too. He was no fool. They had spoken about it, and in a moment of cold pragmatism, they agreed Mark would be the father in name. He would raise the boy, provide the life. Vanessa would provide the lie. Then came Emily. Different trip, same process, same calculated deception. After she gave birth to Emily, Vanessa told Mark the labor had nearly killed her. It had been difficult, dangerous. She was exhausted, drained. Tearfully, she begged him to consider a vasectomy for her health, for their future. Mark, always the protector, didn't hesitate. He went under the knife without protest. Vanessa exhaled in relief. No more risk, no more chances of a Mark baby. She kept taking the birth control pills told him. It helped with her cycle, and he never questioned it. Meanwhile, her quarterly trysts with Eric continued, uninterrupted. They kept things low-key at first. Separate hotels, discreet meetings. Eric wasn't well known outside of the New York office, so the risk was minimal. She never imagined Mark would ever meet him. The distance kept them safe. Until the Christmas party. When Vanessa saw Eric walk into that ballroom, her heart stopped for a second. She cornered him immediately and whispered in his ear, "You need to be cool, calm. I mean it. No games. The last thing I need is you two clashing in the middle of a holiday party." Eric smirked. "Relax. I'm a professional liar. Your little detective won't suspect a thing." And to her surprise, he didn't. Mark and Eric exchanged words cordial, restrained. She watched the two men talk and had to bite the inside of her cheek to hide her anxiety. But on the drive home, Mark asked about Eric, about their past, and when he asked if she had any regrets, she deflected. "I have everything a girl could dream of," she told him, staring out the window. And it was true. She had a doting husband, 2 beautiful children, a solid career, and she had Eric, her secret, her escape, her passion. She thought she had everything under control. But 5 years ago, a problem emerged. A new team member, Megan Carter. Young, curious, observant, too observant. One day, Megan confronted her, straight up. "Is something going on between you and Eric?" she'd asked. Vanessa didn't flinch. She'd been preparing for this day. "Listen, Megan," she said softly. "My husband knows all about it." Megan's eyes widened. "It's kind of an open marriage situation. We have rules. It's fine as long as it's outside our city." Megan still looked skeptical. "And besides," Vanessa added, lowering her voice to a whisper, "he was injured on duty a while ago. He can barely, perform." She let the lie hang in the air, heavy and unchallenged. "I'm embarrassed enough about it as it is. Please don't say anything, okay?" Megan looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Well, okay. I just don't think it's right," Megan had said, her voice tight with discomfort. "But I won't say anything." "Thank you, Megan," Vanessa replied with a grateful, weary smile. "It means a lot to me. Tom and I are really happy. He's great with the kids. I don't want to blow it all up. If this ever got out, it would destroy him." And she meant it. Or at least, that's what she told herself. But over the past few days, something had shifted. Tom had been different. He said it was a case that was bothering him, but there was something behind his eyes, distant, watchful. It unnerved her. Was it just a case? She wondered. Or did he suspect something? She couldn't tell, and that uncertainty gnawed at her more than she expected. Lately, she had begun thinking more about the future. Liam would graduate high school soon. He'd already told her he wanted to follow in Tom's footsteps and join the Marines. Emily, at 17, was still figuring things out, but she wouldn't be far behind her brother. Soon, they'll be gone, Vanessa thought. And then what? She and Eric had danced around the topic of divorce before. She was tempted. God, she was tempted. But she didn't want to do it just yet. If she waited until Tom retired, she could secure half of his pension, along with a significant cut of everything they'd built together. Then she could move to New York, transfer her job, and finally be with Eric full-time. But did Eric even want that? She asked herself. Before she could dwell on it further, the captain's voice came through the intercom, announcing their descent into LaGuardia. Vanessa exhaled and slowly brought herself back to the present. She set her drink aside, returned her tray table, and buckled her seatbelt. Her thoughts continued to swirl even as the wheels touched down. Back in his home office, Mark stared at the monitor. He checked his watch. She should have arrived at her hotel by now. Then, the feed came to life. He saw her enter the room, dragging her suitcase behind her. And right behind her was Eric smirking, relaxed, at home. Mark's stomach clenched. The camera caught everything. Vanessa dropped her bags, turned, and wrapped her arms around Eric's neck. Their kiss was long, slow, and hot enough to make Mark's jaw tighten. His fists clenched on the desk, knuckles pale. He felt like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out a piece of his heart. A few minutes later, they were on the bed, tangled together like animals, laughing between moans. The betrayal was no longer hypothetical. It was being live-streamed. "Oh God, I needed that," Vanessa panted after. "Me too," Eric said, stretching beside her. Then, with a mocking grin, he added, "So how are things with your favorite deputy?" "Please don't talk about Tom like that," she snapped. "He's a respected police officer." Yeah, Eric said with a snort. "I can tell how much you respect him. He's been raising my kids all this time and still has no clue. Maybe I should send him a Father's Day card, thank him for the outstanding job." Vanessa slapped his chest. "Don't you dare." "Are you going to leave him?" he asked, more serious now. "Not until the kids are out of the house," she said matter-of-factly. "Maybe after he retires. That way I can get my share of his pension." Mark felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "I was actually thinking about transferring you to my department," Eric continued. "You'd keep your work history, and we'd be together full-time." Vanessa sighed. "Maybe. After the kids are out. Once they graduate, it won't matter. Right now, they need me to keep up the illusion. 1.5 years. Maybe 2. Considering we've kept this going for 2 decades, that should be a piece of cake." Mark was shaking, barely breathing as he watched. "I really want you to meet them," Vanessa said suddenly. "Your children. Just once. I think you'd fall in love with them the second you saw them." Eric's smile vanished. We agreed. From the moment you first got pregnant, we said I wouldn't have contact with them. You promised. We even agreed you'd pass them off as Tom's." "I remember," she said softly. "But I still think it would be nice. Maybe after the divorce." Eric sat up and checked the time. "We've got dinner reservations. Better get ready." Vanessa got up and walked toward the bathroom. "Okay, I'll shower and change. See you downstairs in, say, 30? "See you then," he said, pulling her back for one more kiss. "I really love you, Eric," she whispered, words Mark had heard countless times, now hollow and bitter, words she had once said to him. "I always did," Vanessa had said, curling the words around Eric like a purr. Mark felt as if someone had gut-punched him. His chest burned, his jaw locked, his stomach roiled. The woman he'd devoted his life to, who he thought he knew inside and out, had given his words, his memories, to another man. And then she had the nerve to call. As Mark watched the feed, Vanessa grabbed her phone and dialed a number. Seconds later, his own phone vibrated on the desk beside him. He stared at it, thumb hovering over decline. But after 3 rings, he forced himself to answer. "Yes," he said. Mark, it's me, Vanessa." "I know. I just wanted to let you know I made it to New York okay." "All right." There was a pause, just long enough to betray tension. "How's everything going with your case?" she asked. "I think I'll have it wrapped up by the time you're back," he said evenly. "I'm very, very close to catching my main suspect." "I'm glad," she replied, voice soft. "I could tell how much it was bothering you." "You have no idea," he said, barely keeping the edge out of his voice. "I'm heading out to dinner in a bit, but I'll call tomorrow night, okay?" "Okay." "I really love you, Mark. You know that, right?" "Yes," he said. "I'll tell the kids you said hi," he added. "Talk soon." "Bye." He hung up without saying the words she expected, without returning the lie. For a moment, he sat in silence, staring at the phone. Did she notice? He wondered. Did she feel it? He turned back to the video feed and watched her for a few seconds longer. Vanessa sat there, still holding her phone, her expression tightening as the silence settled in. Her lips parted slightly, confusion or maybe concern flashing in her eyes. Good, he thought. Let it start sinking in. He saved the video feed to his hard drive and made a secure copy to a USB. Then he turned off the monitor and stepped into the living room. The kids were home now, backpacks slung over chairs, the smell of microwave popcorn lingering in the air. He sat with them through dinner, smiled through their stories about school, asked about test scores and weekend plans. He pretended everything was okay, but inside, everything was unraveling. The next day, the call came. The DNA lab. Mark drove straight there and picked up the sealed envelope himself. He parked in an empty lot nearby, sat in the silence of his car, and opened it with trembling hands. The results hit like a freight train, even though he already knew. Neither child was biologically his. It was official now. He stared at the printout for a long time, numb, not surprised, just hollow. Later that afternoon, he brought the DNA results and the DVD to Lucy's office. She reviewed the lab paperwork carefully, flipping each page with deliberate calm. "Well, this is good," she said. "Solid. But you know we can't use the video in court." Mark nodded. "I figured." "That said, we still have enough to file for divorce. Charges of adultery and fraud. This is a community property state, but the court considers adultery during the division of assets. It could help." "What about the birth certificates?" Mark asked. "Paternity fraud." Lucy frowned. "We'll have to be careful. Without a confession or a signed admission, it's hard to prove. The DNA test confirms it, but unless she admits she knew at the time she signed, it becomes a gray area." "What if I can get her to say it out loud?" Mark asked. "In front of a witness?" Lucy leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Let me think. Come see me Wednesday. I'll have something in place by then." That evening, just like clockwork, Vanessa called. Mark answered, kept his tone calm, clipped, cold. She didn't seem to notice her, maybe she pretended not to. She had perfected pretending. He knew exactly what she'd been doing minutes before that call. The silent lover in the background, the soft voice in her throat, the fake warmth in her words. She had fooled him for years, but not anymore. He never said, "I love you" again. Wednesday arrived. Mark walked into Lucy's office and immediately noticed two people waiting. One was Marvin Morrison, the district attorney. The other was Deputy Sarah Monroe, a sharp and capable officer Mark had worked with on multiple cases. They all rose and exchanged firm handshakes. "Lieutenant Dawson," Marvin said, "Lucy brought your case to my attention, and I have to say what your wife did is beyond betrayal. It's criminal." "I agree that what your wife did constitutes deliberate fraud," Marvin said firmly. "But we need more than a video of her in a hotel room with the guy. That alone won't hold in court." Mark leaned forward. "What do you suggest?" "If you can get her to admit clearly and specifically that she knowingly signed the birth certificates under false pretenses, that's what we need. That's perjury and fraud." Mark nodded slowly. "She's supposed to be back Saturday morning." "Good," Marvin said. "When she calls tonight, confirm that. I'd also recommend having a witness present when you talk to her. Someone official, I assume you know Deputy Monroe? Yeah, Mark said. We've worked together. We're good. Even better, Marvin replied. Have her there. If you can coax Vanessa into admitting what she didn't tape, or at the very least, in the presence of Sarah, she can serve her divorce papers and make the arrest right there. Mark exhaled. I'll let you know what time to expect her. He turned to Sarah. I'll make sure the kids are out of the house. I don't want them seeing their mom being let out in cuffs. Good call, Marvin said. Once she's in custody, I'll take over. I give you my word, we'll handle it strictly by the book. That evening, right on time, Vanessa called. Still planning to come back Saturday morning? Mark asked. Of course, she said, cheerful and breezy. Why? Just thinking. Maybe we should throw a little party or something. Celebrate you being home. That would be so sweet, she said. You know I love you, right? And I've missed you so much. Yes, Mark said neutrally. You haven't told me you love me all week, she said, her voice suddenly hesitant. Or that you missed me. I loved you, he replied, deliberately using the past tense. There was a silence, just a flicker too long. We'll talk later, he said. Bye. He hung up, wondering if she'd caught the shift in his words. She'd always been quick on subtext. He glanced at the live video feed. Sure enough, Vanessa was staring at her phone, visibly unsettled. She blinked slowly, as if trying to understand what just happened. Then, still distracted, she set the phone aside and climbed into bed beside Eric. Well, Eric asked, wrapping an arm around her. They want to have a party when I get back, she said, the corners of her mouth twitching. How unusual, he muttered. She sighed. Something's bothering Mark. He's been cold all week. He says it's just a case, but I think he knows something. Maybe about us. He doesn't know, Eric said dismissively. He's your perfect little cop husband. Clueless. No, she said, shaking her head slightly. You don't know Mark like I do. I think he knows. And I think he's planning something. So what if he knows? Eric scoffed. What's he gonna do? Divorce you? Great. In the end, you'll still get half of everything. He'll be stuck living in a shoebox, eating canned beans. Hell, maybe he'll just blow his brains out and save us all the paperwork. Jesus, Eric, don't talk like that, Vanessa snapped. Then stop talking about him, Eric growled. He's not here. I am. Focus on us. Back home, Mark stared coldly at the screen. He hit the save command, letting the footage upload to his encrypted drive. Then, with a deep breath, he powered down the monitor and stepped into the hallway, putting on a calm face for dinner with the kids. Friday morning, Lucy called. Mark arrived at her office to find Sarah Monroe already waiting, seated with a manila envelope and a grim expression. All right, Mark, Lucy said as he entered. Here are the divorce papers. We're filing for dissolution based on adultery and fraud. I've also included a motion for full guardianship and asked that you retain the house. Mark nodded. Good. I'm pushing for a 70-30th split of marital property, she added. Given the long-term nature of the affair, the deception, the damage, maybe we'll get it. We'll see what the judge says. She handed him a second document. This is a civil suit against Eric Bergstrom. We're going after him for back child support and damages, substantial ones. Mark glanced at Sarah, who stood and nodded. Tomorrow morning, Lucy continued, Deputy Monroe will serve Vanessa the divorce papers and arrest her, and only if you can get her to admit she knowingly committed fraud. I've already forwarded the documents for Eric to the New York office, Lucy said. They'll attempt to serve him Saturday morning. Everything's coordinated. Any questions? Marvin added, looking over at Mark. Mark shook his head. Number. He turned to Sarah. Be at my house by 7:30, if you can. Her flight lands at 7:08, and the drive home won't take long. I know the address, Sarah said with a nod. I'll be there. Thank you, Mark replied. He took a long, measured breath and exhaled. That's everything. It's time. That evening, The final phase of his plan began. He packed a couple of overnight bags and took Liam and Emily to Vanessa's parents' house. The kids were confused more than that. They were anxious, especially Emily. "Wait, Mom's coming home tomorrow morning, right?" Liam asked as they pulled into the driveway. "Yes," Mark said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Then, why can't we stay home?" Emily asked, her voice small but sharp. Mark parked and turned to face them in the back seat. "Listen, kids, I need to talk to your mom about something important, and it's better if you're not there for it." "Are you guys getting a divorce?" Emily asked, her eyes already misting. "Please don't say that. Please, Dad." Mark's heart cracked, but he kept his composure. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do about it anymore." "Did you cheat on her?" she asked. He shook his head. Not once. In all the years we've been married, I've never even looked at another woman." Liam leaned forward. "So, you're saying she cheated on you?" Mark's voice tightened. "Please, just trust me for now. I'll explain everything tomorrow afternoon. I promise. Just don't say anything to your mom." The ride to Maggie and Gerald's house was quiet, except for the sound of Emily softly crying in the back seat. When they arrived, Vanessa's mother opened the door and looked immediately concerned. "What's going on, Mark? Why is Emily crying?" "I'm sorry, Maggie," he said gently. "I need to talk to Vanessa tomorrow when she gets home. I promise I'll tell you everything then." "You're not going to hurt her, are you?" she asked, her voice rising with sudden fear. "No," Mark said firmly. "I would never do that." "You're divorcing her, aren't you?" "I am," he said simply. "Do you have someone else?" It's the opposite." Maggie stared at him, searching his face for more. "All right, you'd better tell us the whole truth tomorrow." "I will," Mark said. "Thanks for watching the kids." He hugged them both tight before turning and heading back into the night. Later that evening, Mark watched the video feed again. Vanessa was lounging naked on the bed beside Eric, scrolling her phone. He called her. She picked up. "You'll be back tomorrow morning, right?" "I will," she said, curling her hair behind her ear. "How's the case?" "Almost wrapped," he said. "If all goes well, the main suspect will be in custody this time tomorrow." "Good," she said, stretching. "Maybe things can go back to normal then." "Maybe," he replied. "I need to go eat. I'll talk to you in the morning." "Okay, bye." He ended the call, watching her face on the screen. She looked down at her phone. Her eyes welled slightly with tears. He didn't feel pity. He smiled instead. "You have no idea what's coming." Saturday morning arrived with heavy gray skies. Rain threatened at the edges of the horizon, but held off for now. Sarah arrived a few minutes before 7 a.m., punctual as always, dressed in plain clothes but carrying her badge in the manila envelope. Inside, Mark had laid everything out. The recorder, the paperwork, even coffee. He was calm, now wired tight, but in control. It was like prepping for an arrest. Except this one hit deeper than anything he'd done in 20 years on the force. He had just stubbed out his cigarette on the patio when he heard it. Garage door, tires on concrete, engine off. Her heels tapped across the floor as she moved toward the back of the house. "Babe?" she called, her voice light and casual, like nothing was wrong. He waved silently, signaling her to join him out on the veranda. "Vanessa," he said. "Come outside. We need to talk." "I hope you had a good flight," Mark said as Vanessa stepped onto the back deck. "Yes," she replied cautiously, her eyes darting around. "What's going on? Who is this?" she asked, glancing at Sarah. "And where are the kids? And why is there a patrol car in our driveway?" Mark's voice was calm but cold. "The kids are with your mother. This is Deputy Sarah Monroe. And yes, that's her patrol car." Vanessa blinked. "Why is a deputy here?" "Please," Mark gestured to the chair. "Sit down. We need to talk." "I'd rather shower first," she said, her tone a bit more defensive now. "No, Vanessa," he said, firm and steady. "Sit down. Now." She froze, startled by the sharpness in his voice, and slowly lowered herself into the chair across from Sarah, positioned at a right angle to Mark's left. Mark pulled out a small digital audio recorder, pressed the red button, and placed it gently on the table between them. "I hope you don't mind if we record this conversation," he said, "given the circumstances." Vanessa's brow furrowed. "What the hell is going on, Mark?" He leaned forward slightly. "Given the nature of what we're about to discuss, I think I should read you your rights." Her mouth opened in disbelief. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand these rights as I've read them to you?" She stared at him like he'd just slapped her. "Of course I understand, but I'm not under arrest. I haven't done anything. Why are you treating me like a suspect?" "Because you are a suspect," Mark said. "In fact, you're the main suspect." He pulled 2 official-looking documents from a folder and laid them carefully in front of her. "Do you recognize these?" Vanessa looked down. "Yes, these are the kids' birth certificates." "Correct," he said. "Certified true copies for Liam Alexander Dawson, 18, and Emily Grace Dawson, 16. For the record, whose signature is on the line marked Mother?" "Mine," she said slowly. "Both of them. Please read the statement printed under your signature." She cleared her throat. "It says, under penalty of perjury, I certify that the above is true and factual." Mark nodded. "And who is listed as the father?" "You," she said. "Obviously." "Read the name out loud." She hesitated, then said, "Mark Evan Dawson." Mark calmly pulled out another document and placed it beside the others. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wavering. "A DNA test conducted by Acme Labs," he said. "Sample A is mine. Sample B is from Liam. Sample C is from Emily." He pointed to the summary section. "Please read this part." Vanessa read aloud, her voice trembling. "Samples B and C are biologically related to each other but are not biologically related to Sample A." "In plain English," Mark said, "I am not the biological father of the children listed on these birth certificates." There was a thick silence. Vanessa's face went pale. "So," Mark said, voice steady and deliberate, "tell us who their real father is." "It's you," she said quickly, panic in her voice. "Of course it's you." "Don't lie to me again," he said, his tone razor sharp. He turned the laptop on the table toward her and hit play. Vanessa's eyes went wide as she saw the surveillance video begin the hotel room. Her, Eric, their first meeting that week. The kiss, the words, the admissions. Her mouth dropped open. "How did you get this?" "I'll ask the questions," Mark said coldly. "In that video, you and your lover, Eric Bergstrom, both admit that he's the biological father of the children and that you knowingly listed me as the father instead. That's fraud." Vanessa stared at the screen, then looked at Mark. Her composure cracked. "Okay," she hissed, face reddening. "Fine, yes, I admit it. I wanted his children, not yours. And yes, I signed the birth certificates naming you as the father. It was my right to decide who I want to see listed as the father of my children," Vanessa continued angrily. "But you had no right to commit fraud," Mark snapped, cutting her off. "You don't get to choose what's true just because it's convenient for you." She opened her mouth to argue, but he pressed on. "Tell me something," he said, voice steady but sharp. "What did you tell your coworkers about your long-term relationship with Mr. Bergstrom?" "What does that have to do with anything?" she said, blinking fast. "Answer the question. Do you know a woman named Megan Carter?" "Yes," she said hesitantly. "She works on my team." "What did you tell her 5 years ago?" "I don't remember exactly." Mark pulled out another printed page. "According to her, you told her we had an open marriage." Vanessa lowered her eyes. "It was complicated. She was getting suspicious." "But we never agreed to that, did we?" he interrupted. "No," she admitted. And what else did you tell her? He continued. Something about me being injured? Vanessa sighed and closed her eyes briefly. Yes, I said you'd been hurt in the line of duty and couldn't have sex anymore. Mark's voice dropped into something colder. According to my attorney, you told several people the same lie. Yes, she whispered. So you admit you lied about me to justify sneaking around with Eric? Yes, she said again, barely audible. Mark stared at her for a long, quiet moment. She couldn't meet his eyes anymore. I see no reason to continue this conversation, he said finally. He looked at Sarah and gave a single nod. Sarah stood, picked up the manila envelope, and stepped forward. Vanessa Dawson, she said with calm authority, you've been served. Vanessa's breath hitched as Sarah placed the envelope in her lap. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. Tears welled up and spilled over almost instantly. Please stand, Sarah said softly. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? Vanessa gasped. Why? You are under arrest, Sarah said clearly, on 2 counts of paternity fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. Vanessa looked at Mark, utterly shattered. What? That's right, Mark said flatly. What you did is a felony in this state. Adultery, by the way, is still a misdemeanor, but the DA says it's unlikely they could get a conviction on that. He paused, then added, you might want to talk to a lawyer before saying anything else. Please, Vanessa begged, her voice cracking. Mark, I love you, please don't do this. Mark's jaw tightened, but his voice was cold and dry. Glad to hear that, Vanessa. I shudder to think what you'd have done to me if you didn't love me. She sobbed openly now, as Sarah gently guided her up, cuffed her, and walked her toward the front of the house. Mark followed them out to the driveway and stood in the open doorway, watching as Sarah opened the patrol car and placed Vanessa inside. Her face was red and wet with tears. Their eyes met one last time, but he didn't flinch. Then the door closed, and Sarah pulled away from the curb. The stillness that followed was crushing. Mark had imagined this moment for days. He thought he'd feel vindicated, victorious. Instead, what settled over him was something emptier, heavier. He had loved her for over 20 years, and she had destroyed that love with quiet precision and years of lies. Now came the hardest part of Al explaining this mess to the 2 kids who still thought their mother was coming home. Mark grabbed his laptop and the USB drive with the edited surveillance video, tucked them under his arm, and headed out the door. Mark drove to Maggie and Gerald's house with his heart pounding in his chest, rehearsing the words over and over in his head, but none of them seemed good enough. What could he possibly say to make this make sense? How do you explain to 2 kids that their entire lives were built on a lie they never asked for? When he pulled into the driveway, he sat for a moment in silence, staring at the front door. Then he got out, laptop and USB in hand, and walked up the steps. Maggie answered almost immediately. Her eyes were tired, cautious. Mark, she said, is everything okay? I think it's time to explain everything, he said quietly. She opened the door wider. Come in. Once inside, he asked, where are the kids? They're in the backyard, she said. I'll go get them. And can you call Gerald too? He should hear this. Gerald, Vanessa's father, was a man Mark had always respected. Honest, steady. The kind of man who didn't say much unless it mattered. A few minutes later, they were all gathered in the living room. The air was tense. Liam and Emily sat close together on the couch, their eyes wide with worry. Maggie and Gerald stood behind them. What's going on, son? Gerald asked. Where's Vanessa? Mark swallowed hard. I suspect she's in county lockup by now. What? Maggie gasped. Jail? For what? Gerald added, shocked. It's a long story, Mark said, taking a deep breath. Please, let me explain. He turned to face Liam and Emily, locking eyes with them. This was the moment that would change everything. A long time ago, he began, voice steady but heavy. Your mom made a decision. A decision that changed all of our lives. He paused, then said the words he had rehearsed in his head 100 times. She decided she didn't want my children. A sharp gasp filled the room. Emily's eyes widened, her mouth trembling. But we are your children, she said, her voice breaking. Mark's heart cracked, but he nodded solemnly. I raised you. I loved you. But biologically, I'm not your father. Liam looked like he'd been punched in the chest. Before she met me, your mom was engaged to someone else, Mark continued. A man named Eric Bergstrom. He didn't want kids. She did. So she found a way. Wait, Maggie said suddenly, her face paling. I remember that guy. Tall, blonde, long hair. Scandinavian, maybe? I think I even have a photo somewhere. She stood up and rifled through a dusty photo album. A few moments later, she held up a faded picture. Gerald's eyes widened the second he saw it. The resemblance was undeniable. Yes, Mark confirmed. That's him. Eric Bergstrom. That's the man who fathered your grandchildren. Everyone sat in stunned silence. So, she's in jail for cheating on you? Liam asked eventually. No, Mark said. She's in jail for something called paternity fraud. He held up the documents. When you were born, your mom signed a legal document certifying that I was your biological father. She knew that wasn't true. She lied. That's a felony. And she didn't just do it once. She did it twice. And even worse, she and Eric worked together to keep me in the dark to make me raise you as my own. That's illegal? Emily whispered. Yes, Mark said softly. She can be fined up to $10,000 per offense and sentenced to 5 years in prison for each count, plus 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. Gerald ran a hand over his face, looking like he had aged 10 years in 5 minutes. That's not all, Mark continued. After Emily was born, she asked me to get a vasectomy, said she couldn't risk another pregnancy, and I did it. I trusted her. But she already knew the truth that neither of you were mine. And still, she kept sleeping with Eric every time she flew out east. Last week, she talked about divorcing me and moving in with him. He held up the USB drive. I have all of it on video, if you want to see it. Maggie shook her head, tears in her eyes. God, Vanessa. Mark turned back to the kids, bracing himself. As you can imagine, I've filed for divorce, but that doesn't change how I feel about either of you. Emily looked up, her lip quivering. What happens to us now? Are we orphans? No, sweetheart, Mark said, moving closer. You'll never be that. I went to court and filed for custody of both of you. I may not be your biological father, but I'm the only father you've ever known, and I will never stop loving you. He paused, his voice cracking now. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you. Emily leapt off the couch and threw her arms around him. Oh, Daddy, she sobbed. I love you too, Emily whispered into Mark's chest, her arms still wrapped tightly around him. Mark looked up through watery eyes and saw Liam standing a few feet away, fists clenched at his sides, trying hard not to cry. He was always the strong one, the quiet protector of his little sister. But right now, he looked like a boy lost in a world that no longer made sense. Mark extended his arm toward him, gently pulling Emily closer with the other. It's okay to cry, son, he said softly. I've done plenty of it myself this week. Liam's shoulders trembled, and tears finally spilled down his face. Am I still your son? He asked in a voice that cracked with pain. Mark didn't hesitate. Of course you are, he said, standing and pulling Liam into the hug. You will always be my son. The three of them held each other crying, trembling, holding on like their lives depended on it. I love you, Dad, Liam said into his shoulder. I love you too, son, Mark whispered back, with everything I've got. And in that moment, despite the pain, despite the betrayal, Mark felt a strange sense of peace. They were his. Not by blood, but by choice, by heart, by every late-night story and scraped knee and moment of pride. That mattered more than DNA ever would. When they finally pulled apart, Gerald cleared his throat. So, what happens to Vanessa now? Mark exhaled. She's in county lockup. The DA is planning to formally indict her, probably Monday. He's also trying to extradite Eric from New York to face conspiracy charges. They're arguing that Vanessa's a flight risk, that she might run off to be with him if she's released on bail. What if they let her out? Maggie asked nervously. I'd be surprised, Mark admitted. But if they do, she'll probably ask to stay here. I've already packed her things. They're in the garage, every last one of them. As if on cue, the landline rang. Maggie picked it up, her face turning grim almost instantly. Julie, calm down. You're hysterical. There was a pause as she listened. Then she looked over at Mark and the kids. Julie, Tom is here. He told us what happened. I'm ashamed of you. More frantic yelling on the other end. If you didn't want his children, Julie, then you should not have married him, Maggie snapped. You lied. You broke the law, and we raised you better than this. She glanced at Mark and added, if they let you out on bail, fine, you can stay here. But don't expect us to act like none of this happened. And the kids? They're staying with Mark. That's not up for discussion. She pulled the receiver away and called out, Kids, your mother wants to talk to you. Do you want to speak to her? Liam and Emily looked at each other. Then, in perfect sync, they answered, Hell no. The room broke into stunned silence, then laughter-dree, exhausted, but real. Maggie covered the phone. Well, I guess that's a no. She returned to the call. Julie, I'm sorry, but they're not interested in talking to you right now. Maybe once things calm down. Yes, we'll look into finding you a lawyer. But for now, we need to go. Julie's muffled sobs could still be heard even after Maggie placed the phone back on the hook. Well, that's that, Gerald said, shaking his head. Girl still has a lot of growing up to do. Maggie sighed and turned to the kids. Why don't you both stay here one more night? Give your dad a chance to rest and get the house in order. Okay, Liam said, wiping his face. Yeah, Emily added. That's fine. Maggie turned to Mark. Everything's going to be all right. You've got us. We'll be here for you and for them. Mark nodded slowly, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, all of you. He hugged Maggie tight, then turned to Gerald, who reached out and shook his hand firmly. Take care of yourself, son, Gerald said. I will, Mark said, his voice thick. I'll be back in the morning to pick them up. As he stepped outside and closed the door behind him, Mark let the evening air wash over his face. The wind was cool. The night was still. And for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could finally breathe. Mark drove to Maggie and Gerald's house with his heart pounding in his chest, rehearsing the words over and over in his head, but none of them seemed good enough. What could he possibly say to make this make sense? How do you explain to two kids that their entire lives were built on a lie they never asked for? When he pulled into the driveway, he sat for a moment in silence, staring at the front door. Then he got out, laptop and USB in hand, and walked up the steps. Maggie answered almost immediately. Her eyes were tired, cautious. Mark, she said, is everything okay? I think it's time to explain everything, he said quietly. She opened the door wider. Come in. Once inside, he asked, where are the kids? They're in the backyard, she said. I'll go get them. And can you call Gerald too? He should hear this. Gerald, Vanessa's father, was a man Mark had always respected. Honest, steady. The kind of man who didn't say much unless it mattered. A few minutes later, they were all gathered in the living room. The air was tense. Liam and Emily sat close together on the couch, their eyes wide with worry. Maggie and Gerald stood behind them. What's going on, son? Gerald asked. Where's Vanessa? Mark swallowed hard. I suspect she's in county lockup by now. What? Maggie gasped. Jail? For what? Gerald added, shocked. It's a long story, Mark said, taking a deep breath. Please, let me explain. He turned to face Liam and Emily, locking eyes with them. This was the moment that would change everything. A long time ago, he began, voice steady but heavy. Your mom made a decision that changed all of our lives. He paused, then said the words he had rehearsed in his head 100 times. She decided she didn't want my children. A sharp gasp filled the room. Emily's eyes widened, her mouth trembling. But we are your children, she said, her voice breaking. Mark's heart cracked, but he nodded solemnly. I raised you. I loved you. But biologically, I'm not your father. Liam looked like he'd been punched in the chest. Before she met me, your mom was engaged to someone else, Mark continued. A man named Eric Bergstrom. He didn't want kids. She did. So she found a way. Wait, Maggie said suddenly, her face paling. I remember that guy. Tall, blonde, long hair. Scandinavian, maybe? I think I even have a photo somewhere. She stood up and rifled through a dusty photo album. A few moments later, she held up a faded picture. Gerald's eyes widened the second he saw it. The resemblance was undeniable. Yes, Mark confirmed. That's him. Eric Bergstrom. That's the man who fathered your grandchildren. Everyone sat in stunned silence. So, she's in jail for cheating on you? Liam asked eventually. No, Mark said. She's in jail for something called paternity fraud. He held up the documents. When you were born, your mom signed a legal document certifying that I was your biological father. She knew that wasn't true. She lied. That's a felony. And she didn't just do it once. She did it twice. And even worse, she and Eric worked together to keep me in the dark to make me raise you as my own. That's illegal? Emily whispered. Yes, Mark said softly. She can be fined up to $10,000 per offense and sentenced to 5 years in prison for each count, plus 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. Gerald ran a hand over his face, looking like he had aged 10 years in 5 minutes. That's not all, Mark continued. After Emily was born, she asked me to get a vasectomy, said she couldn't risk another pregnancy, and I did it. I trusted her. But she already knew the truth that neither of you were mine. And still, she kept sleeping with Eric every time she flew out east. Last week, she talked about divorcing me and moving in with him. He held up the USB drive. I have all of it on video, if you want to see it. Maggie shook her head, tears in her eyes. God, Vanessa. Mark turned back to the kids, bracing himself. As you can imagine, I've filed for divorce, but that doesn't change how I feel about either of you. Emily looked up, her lip quivering. What happens to us now? Are we orphans? No, sweetheart, Mark said, moving closer. You'll never be that. I went to court and filed for custody of both of you. I may not be your biological father, but I'm the only father you've ever known, and I will never stop loving you. He paused, his voice cracking now. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you. Emily leapt off the couch and threw her arms around him. Oh, Daddy, she sobbed. The next day, Mark kept his word and went to see Miss Harris after school. He felt oddly nervous as he made his way through the hallways, a little more self-conscious than he wanted to admit. When he finally reached her classroom, she stood and extended her hand with a warm smile. Captain Dawson, she said. Miss Harris, he replied, taking her hand. But the moment their hands touched, something unexpected happened. It wasn't fireworks exactly, more like a quiet surge. Familiar warmth. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. It rattled him more than he expected. Nice to meet you, he said, tripping over his words slightly. He didn't want to let go of her hand right away, and he caught himself giving her a quick once-over, hoping it wasn't too obvious. She was pretty striking in an understated way. Petite, brunette, deep brown eyes that sparkled with quiet confidence. And her smile, it hit him like a sunrise after a long, stormy night. "Oh, please," she said, laughing. "Call me Brenda, Captain Dawson. And you can call me Mom, apparently," he replied with a sheepish grin. "Marie said you wanted to see me?" Brenda tilted her head. "Did she now? I don't remember saying that. But hey, it's always nice to meet the parents of my favorite students." "I see," he said, chuckling. "So, she tricked me. Again." She gave a knowing smile. "I heard you're divorced?" "Yeah, that's true. And raising a teenage daughter on your own? That's impressive. Not an easy task." "Well," he said, leaning in just a little, "I'm armed, and I have handcuffs." She laughed, tan, honest, melodic sound. He noticed her left hand. No rings, but there were faint indentations where one had once been. "I see you're not married either?" "No," she said, her smile softening. "Divorced. A while ago now." "Looks like my daughter's playing matchmaker again," he said, shaking his head. "I really need to have a talk with her." Brenda grinned. "You're not alone. My daughter did the same thing before she left for college. Teenagers are sneakier than most criminals." "Well, I'm sorry to bother you," Mark said. "I'll let you get back to work." "It's okay," she replied. "I was just wrapping up anyway. Was going to grab a quick bite and head back to my lonely old house." She hesitated, then added, "Unless you're free. Maybe we could have dinner? Maybe even a glass of wine." Mark paused. For the first time in a long while, he let himself feel a flicker of something new. "Why not?" he said with a smile. As they walked toward the door, he stopped for a second. "Just one thing, before we go." "What's that?" "You don't happen to have an ex-boyfriend from college hiding in New York or anything, do you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Brenda burst out laughing. "Oh, holy heavens, no!" "Okay then," Mark said, extending his hand again. "What do you like? Italian? Mexican?" "Surprise me," she said, taking his arm as they stepped into the hallway. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Mark Dawson walked away from the past towards something that maybe, just maybe, looked like a future.